Hello, Jeff. How are you?
Oh, very well. Can you hear me?
I can, yes. Yeah,
Oh,
loud and clear. Hello.
that is marvelous. That is marvelous. I've lost my fancy sage background, but never mind. I shall have to drag a poster in from somewhere and put that behind me. But still, I'm wearing my Sage Foundation t-shirt.
Very fetching.
The sun is shining, and I'm all set to answer any questions. Are we live yet? We are live.
Yes, we're
2
live now.
o'clock.
Yeah.
We should be live.
More and more people joining as we speak.
Good. Good. We've had some there's been conversations taking place in the social lounge and also in some of the private chats that people have been sending me, and those could be starting points for any conversations. But let's see what we've got in the way of questions that are coming in yet. Do I see anything in the chat? Nothing in the chat so far, unless people are coming in. Oh, look, I see where there are 31 people in here, but this is terrible. We've only got a maximum of 501.
A long way to go then. Long way to go. I think just for everybody's benefit, this is a Q&A session, so you should be able to submit questions through the GoToWebinar link. We'll have visibility of those questions, and as and when they come in, then we'll start firing some answers at you.
If not, we can do what David Beard and I seem to do on a lot of our webinars, which is start having essentially a water cooler technology about technology. So we could do that if you like, and see how it reflects into CRM. Now, so Kieran, what's your background? Chef. What's your background in CRM? How long have we known each other?
Quite a long time, actually. Got to be 15 odd years now. So originally, as you quite possibly know, I came on board as an end user. Company I was working for, an electrical testing company of all things, decided they needed something to better manage contact with customers and prospects and the like. So we went out to the market, we discovered Sage CRM, and then we spent, and bearing in mind this was 15 years ago, we spent near £250,000 worth of new hardware and software to bring this system in. Mm-hmm. So we worked closely with the business partner. Funnily enough, that's where I met Danny Lewis as well, because he was working for the business partner at the time. And he was actually the lead consultant that came in and helped us implement Sage CRM, which once we decided his value, we currently poached him as an employee. So he technically went from business partner to end user and was able to see it from the other side of the coin. So that's how the journey started.
That's interesting. It's interesting how we all make our own ways through the journey into Sage CRM. So you've come from an end user background, but you're obviously technical. Were you technical when you were within the end user company? Were you part of the business side, or were you part of the IT side of the customer?
So at that point, I was part of the IT side. I've been with the company since it was almost started, from about 5 or 6 employees up to about 200. And I've done various different roles throughout. So I knew the business side of it really well. I knew how the company grew, the sort of growing pains that it experienced while it was trying to grow. And so when it did come to implementing Sage CRM, I could look at it both from a technical point of view, but also from a business point of view as well. So I had quite a rounded view of what the company needed. And based on that knowledge, we were able to align ourselves with Sage CRM as probably the best solution. And just to let you know, the company is still using it. They've gone through various mergers and acquisitions, and they're still using Sage CRM.
So we like to try and think. We like to think that using Sage CRM is a little bit like the Hotel California, in that you start using it and then you find that you can't really stop using it, because it adds so much value, and especially within an integrated environment. Now, when you started working, was that within an integrated system? So was it working with the account system or another back office?
It was. We had Sage 200 already, but at that point there wasn't an integration between the two systems. We used an integration that was written by the business partner that Daniel worked for, a business partner called BDE, no longer around, unfortunately, but they'd written a link between Sage CRM and Sage 200, or MME and MMS, as they were then called. So that was probably one of our biggest drivers in adopting Sage CRM, is that it could integrate with the account system even 15 years ago. So yeah, the journey started early for us for an integrated system.
Well, that was one of the fascinating things about when I came on board myself into Sage CRM. I'd come from a background of working from a company called Kana, and then I joined Eware. And right at the start, when working with when the product was called Eware, it was interesting because it was the web and wireless framework. It was advertised as this product that could essentially, it was a web and wireless CRM product, so it could be deployed anywhere, run on any device, be available to anyone for whatever their purpose. And but it was always seen as a tool that could integrate and develop, and it was very, very easy to connect to other systems. I'd come from this environment, very similar technology, in the sense that you wrote in what were then classic ASP pages, or you wrote extensions, ISAPI extensions. Kana and their CRM web portal tool, and it was we have. Sorry, I'm starting to see the chat, the internal
We start to get
event
some questions
chats
coming through now. Yeah.
That's distracting me. I want to keep talking.
Okay, well,
I want to keep
I know
riffing
you do.
away.
I know you do. It's good time to stop, actually, because we're actually starting to get some questions in now. So the first one was submitted by Paul Karen. Thank you very much, Paul. It says, hi, we have used Sage CRM for years and have always had issues with integration with Outlook. We are moving to Office 365. Should we change our approach and integrate it with Office 365 rather than with the desktop client for Outlook?
Now, I have a confession to make, and Kieran, please chip in from your perspective as well, from a partner's perspective. From my perspective, and when it comes to education and work, I am very much focused on the development issues. So I look at this from how I can typically extend CRM rather than how some features work. And the Outlook integration is something of a black box to me, in the sense that there's nothing you can look into it. You're working with what we've got. Now we've recently gone through a bit of change. Well, actually, a lot of the development work associated with 2020 R2 is going in to work around Exchange and Outlook, and making sure that it's deployable where we need it to be deployed and things. So that was especially true with 2020 R1. With where we're going, I would nearly always say, this is a personal opinion now, that it's easier to support and work with things if you're working with the Exchange integration. So if you've got a choice and you want to be able to ensure that you're synchronizing your meetings, your contacts, etc., and you want the fewer problems, then Exchange integration represents the way to go. Now, the reason for that is on the basis of the touch points and the possible points of failure. When you're working with Outlook integration, you're having to deal with integrations and syncs between the Outlook clients and the CRM server. So you've got if you've got 20 users, you've got 20 integration touch points. With the Exchange integration and integration with 365, and the Exchange 365, you're reducing that to a single point of integration, although you've then got to worry about the configuration of potential issues with the individual mailboxes and things. But it's a much more robust and more easily supported integration. Now, in terms of features, I would look as well, depending on your needs, I'd look to things whether you need to use the which integration is correct for you. When you're working with Sage 365 integration, so you're integrating with the Exchange server, then you're going to be using the Outlook Lite plugin, which does a smaller job and should be more easily controlled and deployed as well. But I'm not sure how much that is adding to Paul's original question. I wonder if anyone else, Kieran, are you going to chip in on that as well?
I think that's a really good summary, Jeff. There's probably not much more that can be said. It does sound like a very much a horses for courses thing. I think we've got, just so you know, we've also got John Kingsbury as a panelist on here. I work with John at Cumulus, and a very technical minded guy, can come up with some really out of the box and left-sided solutions sometimes. So I'd just like to welcome John along. Hiya, John.
Hi, John.
Please feel free to chip in as and when. Okay, so thank you very much for answering Paul's question with a great amount of detail, Jeff. Thank you. The next one we have has come in from someone well known in the UK channel, Alison Arnold.
Hello, Alison.
Alison asks, following on from a posted discussion earlier, what is the best way to import data into communications, etc., which are not covered by the standard import utility? Now, I suspect this is quite a leading question, so we might have to be careful on what we get drawn into here, but it'd be interesting to know your thoughts, Jeff.
Okay, well, when you're carrying out a bulk import of anything that is anything that is out of usual, then I think you've got a couple of options to before you start to do any code, before you start to do anything. And the first question to ask is, are all of the communications necessary to be brought across? And defining what we mean by a communication. And then a communication of note, something that does have to be kept in place. Within Sage CRM, you're going to have this idea that a communication is going to be structured between the principal contact. So you'll have the question of who is the user, who is the person, and then there may be also a subsequent link to an entity, whether that entity is one of the prime entities, like an opportunity or a case. So the communication takes place in the context of something. And you have this complex structure within inside the interface, inside the database, where you are relating those entities with the communication table and a communication link table. And you've got types of communications which are appointments because they are anchored within time and they have a duration and a start and an end time. They will involve multiple people, and there will be multiple communication link records for those communications. Tasks are much easier to be able to handle because there's a single link really between the person, the user, I should say, the user who's got the work allocated to them, the communication link table, which links that into the context, and then the communication table, which is the body of the table. And once you've got your head around about that structure, when you're thinking about things, you also have to think about does this communication have an associated document with it? So is it a communication that is associated with a mail merge that went out? Are we, and in the external system, if we were importing it, do we need to also create an associated library entry and store the documents with it? So there's a whole question about what do we mean by communication and what do we want to bring across? And we may want to decide that certain types of information we're not going to bring across. We're not going to bring across historic meetings that were internal. We're only going to be concentrating on meetings that were the customer meeting. So once we've got an understanding of the data, I would go through a process of narrowing down the data. Then we come on to the question of how do we migrate the data into how we migrate the data into Sage CRM, and here we've got choices around our APIs. The COM API doesn't really have, this is if you were thinking about the classic ASP type approach of taking information and it doesn't have an entity for what a task is, what a appointment is. You'd have to code that for yourself. There is some example code in there on the communities on Sage City, but the .NET API does have a class concept of what a communication is, and what an appointment is, what a task is. So there is so you could be using an import utility. So if this is a regular task that you need to do to suck things in from another source that needed to be pumped into CRM as historical records or ongoing records, but entered into another system so that you create a single point of view, then the .NET API does have the concept in classes to do that. And lastly, I think both the SOAP and the REST APIs also support the concept of the entities. So we can use this is the communication entity, so we can use those for insertion of the records. Now, when it comes to uploading of documents, because I outlined right at the beginning that communications are likely to have associated with them, some communications are likely to have associated with them library entries if this is a result of a merge or a document that has been sent out, then you're a little bit more limited as to what you can do with the uploads. It's probably easier to do the COM and the .NET uploads of documents into the system. It's easy to create the library entry using the APIs. And when it comes to using the SOAP and the REST APIs, there are methods, but neither of them are officially documented. So that's a sort of where you'd have to probably do a little bit of hunting around to find those documented. Now, I've described all there the alternative methods within Sage CRM that I can think of for carrying out that type of migration. And again, I think, Kieran, you need to tuck away that and keep to the slide.
Yes. I think what I'm trying to do, Jeff, because I think I'm the only one who can actually see your wonderful face while you're giving us these brilliant discussions. So if I can just...
really? So you can't
yes.
actually, you can't.
So I'm just, if you could all just bear with me, I'm just trying to get my screen sorted out.
Oh no, David is saying you can see it. People can see it. I think I'm probably in the top fifth of the occupying. There you go. Oh, you maximised me.
Have I?
Well, you did, and then it dropped back down.
Okay.
David Beard is being very rude about me on another chat, which you can't see.
Oh, marvelous. Okay, well, I think thank you very much again for a great answer.
Sorry,
As I think we can.
There is one more. Sorry,
Okay.
this was Alison's question. Was a big question.
Yeah.
So she deserves the full fire hose. And if you are if you don't like the approach that Sage CRM has, because of course we don't have this upload, or when you're doing a migration from another system, or you're doing a migration and you're faced with thousands and thousands and thousands of hundreds and thousands of communication records, then you might want to use some of the alternative tools. And I think that out there we've still got still the possibility of using Starfish STL and so on. And there are tools that you could use to do some movement of data, bulk data. Okay, now I'm finished.
Fantastic, brilliant. Thank you very much, Jeff. So as you can see, outside of the standard entities, companies, people and leads, which are fairly flat tables, the subject of data import is very subjective and not a simple one to answer. Okay, so moving on to our next question. Our next question is from Matthew Shaw. It says, when putting a report view together, what are the fields that must be in the view? Matthew has come across times when a report is accessible in the reports area, but is then not available for a list gadget.
Oh,
so I think,
okay. Yeah. All right.
So I think we all know the standard thing that within any kind of view, you must include the standard ID fields, the created by, the security territories, that sort of thing.
Yes. The views are a funny little set of creatures with inside Sage CRM. You can define views very easily, and there won't be an error when you come to define a view. So imagine you've got a company table and you just want to be able to report on the company and people within that company, and you might have a view that joins the company and person table using a very simple inner join, but you miss out some of the columns. Now, from a system administrator point of view, it doesn't matter because the system administrator is not bound by security. So we can know that our view will work for the system administrator. But then what you were talking about, Kieran, is that bang, if somebody is inside a security policy, somebody who's governed by security, you immediately run into the problems of if your view does not include the fields required to support the entity management in terms of security. So it has to have all of the sector, any of the fields basically that are governed by security policies. So all of those, and thankfully when you go in and you build a view, you're told what fields you need to include. You do get strange situations, usually within groups, where if you're trying to use a view for a group, what a group will object to is you have to include the primary key of the entity of which you're interested. So if you are wanting to work with a creative group around opportunities, then you have to have your person and company information there, plus the opportunity key. But there mustn't be duplicates. So, and that's another thing within the group. So there's a setting that you can do to change that. But essentially, grouping is about identifying groups of records that work can be done on, and the most important and most obvious types of work are focused on contact. So but the question is about working with views. A report is accessible in the reports area, but it's not available in a list gadget. Now,
it's a difficult one, that. I've been mulling that one over myself. The only thing I could think of is maybe the entity, the context of the entity isn't quite set correctly. Maybe the views against one entity and you're building it against a list that maybe in another. Checking things out like that may make a difference, may help out.
Yeah,
I believe,
question has come in from the side. Sorry, is that John talking?
Yeah, John. Sorry, John. What were you saying?
Yeah, so I believe gadgets only allow you to use views that are within primary entities. So if you've got a view in order items, for example, it won't show up in the list.
That's a good point.
That's true enough, but are we talking about a not available for a list gadget? Okay, list gadgets are interesting because list gadgets are based on reports. List gadgets are and they have to be available, yes, for primary entities. You can you can build gadgets that pull in from new primary entities, ones that are custom, but they do have to be based on structures. List gadgets are based on 4 types of data source. So I'm trying to make sure that my fingers are in the camera view here. 4 types of data source. You've got dynamic groups. So dynamic groups, you've got reports, saved queries, and so the saved searches and advanced searches. So you could always try. No, it has to be one of those types, and I don't know why a view that was successful to make a report would not be available inside a list gadget. No.
I think this is one of those ones, Jeff, that without a bit more context and a bit more detail, it's difficult to answer accurately. So maybe we could possibly follow this up after the session.
Absolutely, it's a wider sort of general question. Maybe it's the sort of thing that can be asked on Sage City, either on or within the discussion boards here of the meeting.
Yeah, so Matthew, if that's okay, if you're still on and listening, if you could either post something for us in Sage City to have a look at with a bit more detail, or something on the discussion boards, then we can follow this up afterwards. So thank you very much for that. So moving on, the next question comes from Edwin Tebow. So I hope I've pronounced that correctly. The question is, are using Sage 300 and are now implementing Sage CRM. So the question is, can you access a customer found in Sage 300 automatically in CRM after integration? Now, sorry, Jeff, but I don't know much about Sage 300. How about you and the integration with Sage CRM? Is that something you can
my face was draining then. And when you can bring down, my understanding is that there's a sync process, and you would bring down the account details and the contact details into Sage CRM. So if you've got an existing instance of Sage 300, then once the integration is carried out, you would be able to populate Sage CRM through that, and it works on the basis of most latterly it's a full 2-way sync. So if you change something in Sage CRM, it will change it inside CRM. There's been a remodeling, I think it was in 2019, that there was a remodeling of the integration with Sage 300 to make use of the new web screen APIs from Sage 300. So it's a it's a good modern integration. I can I haven't prepped and pulled together material on the 300 integration, I'm afraid, but I do have some stuff available. And if you have a look on the Sage City, inside my hints and tips blog, well, it's not mine, but it's the one that I've mostly maintained. But inside the hints and tips blog, inside the Sage CRM section of Sage City, you should find that I've written some articles about how the integration works from a CRM perspective, explaining the architecture of that. Next, yeah, okay. I can't go on to. There's not much more I can say about that.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much, Jeff. So the next question from Anthony Volp. Again, I hope I pronounced that correctly. As a North American partner, all of our clients using Sage CRM have it integrated with Sage 100 ERP. They often want to see Sage 100 data in Sage CRM on the dashboard, which I bring over through a Sage CRM view. One of the problems I often have with the dashboard is the inability to filter or sort the fields that are from Sage 100 ERP. Any suggestions?
Filtering on fields that are, you're not going to be able to filter on fields that are, I think, numerics. So in terms of building a view that is on a foreign system, then here I'm having to work from memory, so excuse me on that. But when working with list gadgets internally have the ability to then provide filtering on information, but the filtering is really only on alphabetics. So if you're finding there's a difficulty with that, then I wonder whether you might want to look at the way in which, as you're connecting to the Sage 100 database, and goodness, in terms of the Sage 100 database that I used to do it, I used to have to create through an ODBC driver. I don't, is that still the case that you have to go through an ODBC driver to be able to do that, or is it on still just creating a fully referenced view in the context of SQL Server? Has that database, is the database on SQL Server now?
So again, another context-related environment. I'm just trying to see if we can get an answer from Anthony. So Anthony's saying, yes, the database is on SQL.
Okay, then if the database, if it's on SQL, then you might well be able to create and trying to think about how you've created the integration, whether the integration is known about inside Sage CRM, so it's treated as though it was a Sage CRM table. Have you created the table through advanced customization tables and databases and created a connection through to the 100 database? Or are you designing a view that is doing a fully referenced view out into the external database? It matters in terms of how the data is conceived by Sage CRM.
So thanks, Jeff. While we hopefully wait for an answer from Anthony on that, I've just had an external message from somebody going back to, I believe it was Matthew's question about the list gadget on the dashboard not always showing. I think Matthew kindly replied saying it's not it doesn't often happen. It can be resolved by rewriting the view, but sometimes what you could possibly do is use SQL Server Profile to record what's happening in the background when you try and load that list view up on a dashboard. Sometimes if you can see what queries are being run in the background, it can sometimes help you diagnose any issues with those particular queries, and maybe even highlight if it is either security related or something's not quite right there.
Oh, but that's Matthew's point there is very, very good. And one of the peculiar things is that about Sage CRM is if you think that you know the SQL that Sage CRM is going to use, then you're probably deluded. The reason being is, sorry, if you go into write a view inside Sage CRM, and you write a really simple select star from company, and you save that, and you log on as another user like Susan May or Brian Little, one of the demo users, and you go along and access a structure that depends on that view, so a report or a list, what you will find is that the view has been dynamically changed. And it's the dynamically changed nature of the way in which SQL is processed that is probably at the root of any issue as to why it doesn't show up. You can have all sorts of fun and games as you look at things, and because it's created additional even sub-selects sometimes. And it's doing that for automatic tuning. It's to do with the context maintenance, being able to make sure that you've got the right information, tying in to the user session as well. So there'll be some information there, and it may well be to do with the context that you're in as well, where additional information is applied, how it's used, change the report. Change the actual SQL that is fired to the database. So working with SQL Profiler, working with the SQL logs inside Sage CRM is an education.
Very good point, and thank you very much for that again, Jeff. Moving on to our next question. We've got about 10 minutes left, so we'll get through the remaining questions as quickly as we can. Another one from Alison Arnold. Somewhere I've struggled is maintaining the integrity of links. In the past, I've tried to use Innoport, but have found that it does not maintain that integrity. I have looked at writing an import tool again, but as the Sage CRM APIs are not great at enforcing business logic or data integrity. So it's more of a statement than a question, but when you say links, Alison, I assume you mean links between entities, so making sure that companies are linked to people, are linked to opportunities, the correct quotes and orders, that sort of thing. And again, I assume this is probably related to data imports as well.
I'm champing. I want to be able to talk. Can I talk?
You can. Over to you, Jeff.
This is all about. Can I right back to when I started off my career within software companies. I worked for a company called Usoft. It was a subsidiary of Unisys, and it was a rapid application development tool. And the thing that you had to be really, really hot on is designing the data models was referential integrity. So that's my baby. Referential integrity and thinking about key integrity and forms of denormalization and normalization is something that was what I ate all the time, and had to think about how you create within a complex environment, which might as you try and model the real world, and you're left with numerous different entities, and you're worrying about the keys. I have actually written in my, I think I made allusion to the fact that I'd written a series. Oh no, I didn't actually say it here. I said it in one of the discussions. I've written a blog series on migrating from other CRM systems into CRM. And one of the challenges when you're bringing data from any other system into CRM is how do you keep the relationships between what was the account in the other system and the company inside the Sage CRM, the contact, and how you move that into being a person, and how you divvy up the data. And if you're moving in information about a sales opportunity, how does it stay as an opportunity in Sage CRM? And if it's a ticket in a system that is a support system, how do you get it to be a case inside Sage CRM, and how do you do that? And what I've had to do in the past is go through processes of really bringing the data across, not as one single hit, but actually dividing it up into a whole series of smaller chunks, and having to use the concept of alternative keys. And that's where you keep the original key and you migrate to the original key, but it becomes a field or a column inside the target data inside Sage CRM, but as a field that is simply there for legacy purposes. And once you've brought information across into separate islands of data, you then have to run a series of SQL statements to be able to mesh the data again. But if you've kept the original keys in whatever system, when it comes across into Sage CRM, anything that you're going to drop into a CRM table typically is going to have the identity of automatically generated for you. You're not going to have that control over what the ID is, but you need to be able to keep that. Anyway, that's there is an article. There are some articles on Sage City that do touch on the agony of foreign key referential integrity.
That's brilliant, Jeff. I agree with you completely there. We've done several migrations from ACT into Sage CRM, and use the exact same strategy. So against the company or the person, there'll be a new column for the at ID, which is a GUID string. And once you've got, invariably when you do a data migration, the customer's never happy and there's always stuff you may have missed. So having those foreign keys stored locally within the CRM data allows you to not have to go through the import again, but be able to bring in extra data and link it to existing records. So yeah, that's a great idea there. It's worked very, very well for us. So good luck with that. Okay, our next question. Well, Anthony's just replied about the Sage 100 issue. So he's basically said that he hasn't added the views through advanced settings, just created the view directly on the database. Then goes on to say that sometimes if the Sage 100 is an SQL database, he imports it nightly into SQL data and adds it to the CRM database. So I think it's just a SQL view that's referenced through metadata rather than being added as a linked table or linked database.
Okay. Okay, this is actually one of the perfect opportunity. That type of question is a good discussion point for Sage City within the CRM forums, and I would look forward to looking at that and thinking about it. I think people would, even if they're not familiar with Sage 100, the question is of interest to anyone who's trying to connect to different databases. This is a challenge, by the way, that if you've made your investment, imagine you've got your core pillars of the accounting system and you've got your CRM system. You've got, if you like, the front end, and now you've got front end is provided by Sage CRM, and you've got the core accountancy backgrounds. But there are other systems that you want to bring in to be able to do, whether it's an HR system or whether it is to do with a delivery system. These are all things that you can start to integrate into Sage CRM as well. And Sage CRM, at its heart, was all about connecting and allowing other databases to be viewed and brought together and then surfaced within the front end. Indeed, one of the projects that I did, if you can get it into an SQL form, you can get it into Sage CRM. And even if you can't get into an SQL form, if you can get it into HTML, you can still surface it into CRM. I've worked with projects which have been started off essentially as screen scraping an old a VT20 type application, putting it into HTML and then shoving the information into CRM, or looking at databases which are certainly non-SQL, but with drivers that allow them to be accessed by queries, and then they can be surfaced with inside Sage CRM as well. So flat files or whatever you've got. I'll shut up.
Fantastic, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Jeff. We've still got a few minutes, so and still got a couple of questions to get through. So the next one is from Mark Stringer. Great question here, which may turn into a bit of a feature request, but we'll see. The question is, will workflows change so that we can edit an enabled workflow? Having to disable a workflow before editing means it is only really practical to do out of hours.
Right, well, experience tells me you should never run with scissors. And I think that even if we were to change workflows and there are some suggestions buzzing around what we can do with workflow. Even if we were to change workflows, we're unlikely to go down the direction of allowing workflows to be dynamically changed as people are in the system or as people are using that particular workflow. It's largely to do with wanting to avoid creating orphaned records. We've just been handling. We got into one of my colleagues in L3 support has just written a very good blog article about how to get around an issue that was occurring in the design, based on the design of the workflow, when a workflow task had ended prematurely, been cancelled by a user, leaving it in a hanging state where it looked like some of the tasks had been done, but it hadn't moved it on into the next workflow state. It hadn't confirmed that. Anything that creates that sort of issue, we wouldn't do. I don't think that we would go down the route of allowing people to dynamically change a workflow as people are in the system. But changing workflows, I would certainly welcome any thoughts that you might have about what features you want for workflow and how we can make it even better. One of the perennial questions is, do we want to be able to show a map of where a user is within a workflow on the screen? Can we do that? Should we do that? Should we change it in other ways to allow perhaps orchestration with other systems? Answers on a postcard, please.
Fantastic, thank you, Jeff. We've got a couple more questions, and I realise that we're just about out of time now, but I'll quickly ask these. There may be some quick answers. So first one is from Matthew Shaw. Is there a solution to when looking at CRM in a browser not at 100% view, sometimes the icons or the center content disappears? Is this something that Sage are aware of, and will they be fixing it anytime soon?
I actually think this is aimed at this is more of a Cumulus thing. Surely this is more of a Cumulus thing because I know you've got little CSS fixes for this sort of.
We have indeed.
You have. So the answer is yes, and we hang our heads in shame that we should really steal the code that Cumulus have and puts it into our own CSS file. So yes.
So
sorry.
the answer is yes. Everyone's aware of it, and yes, there is a fix. And finally, we have one final question from Edwin Thibault again. So it looks like if an existing company already has an account system and they want to adopt Sage CRM, is there a need to create the customer again in Sage CRM, or can it come across automatically from the software which is currently being used? So
it depends on what the software is.
Agreed. Yeah.
It really does depend on the stuff. If you're working with a piece of Sage software, there's core integrations with, I think, 12 Sage accounting systems around the world. If you then add on the partner integrations provided by companies like Cumulus or Greatrix or others, which there are lots of integrations, and Oakley, Marder, people have written very, very clever integrations. And I apologize if I've forgotten anybody else who's on here. Azamba has written integrations with different things as well. Dan Cousins, DCA, whatever your system is, your accounting system, though, if you're using an existing integration, yes, you can. If not, it's down to a design. It's down to how you design the integration between the accounting system and CRM, whether you need to bring the two across.
Fantastic.
But yeah, there you go.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Jeff. And again, as Jeff has mentioned several times during the session this afternoon, Sage City is a fantastic resource to put these ideas out to the community and get some feedback. All of the partners are on there regularly, as well as end users and other valuable resources. Talking about Sage City, there is a session later on this afternoon on the resources available in Sage City. So please make sure you check that out on the sessions list. Just remains to say thank you very much to Jeff, and thank you to John for being our panelists today. We hope you enjoyed this Sage CRM surgery, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the summit. Thank you very much.
Thank you.